Folks, welcome to a special edition of the Jake Feinberg Show. My show has and always will be about preserving and promoting our cultural heritage by looking to master musicians, journalists, record producers, and historians to fill in the blanks for younger generations of people who seek authenticity, individuality, and humanity in their lives. My guest today has a job that many people would like to have. He is the archivist for the Grateful Dead. What does that mean? To me, it stands for someone who has tremendous responsibility, not to the legions of fans or even the band itself. Rather, an understanding that he himself has been blessed with an opportunity to cultivate real American roots music, taking into account the times, the venues, the stories, the instruments, the set lists, the camaraderie, the backstory, and the brilliance. Then there is the 2-track, 4-track, 8-track, reel-to-reel, analog cassettes, dealing with muddy soundboards, making sure there are 2 drummers in the mix, and painting a full picture of a band that's lifespan encompassed 40 years. The music is always greater than the individual. One of the greatest stories ever told. David Lemieux, it's an honor to have you on the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, I appreciate that, Jake. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Can you talk a little bit about, if I read correctly, your first show was Hartford '87?
Correct. It was March 26th. It was the first night of a 2-night run on, I don't know if they call it the comeback tour, but the second half of 1986, Jerry was sick. He got sick in the summer of '86, and they took the rest of '86 off until December, and then they hit the East Coast for a tour, as they generally did, in March of '87, and that's when I saw my first show.
My question actually, could you talk to my audience about the most intimate venue? Because let's face it, I mean, after about '84, they stopped playing. They were no longer on college campuses after '83. '84 had some funky venues, but I just want to know the funkiest intimate venue that you were able to see the Dead play at.
I guess that would, it would have to be definitely be the Zenith in Paris, France in 1990. And as you mentioned, by '84, they stopped playing places like Marin Civic and smaller college campus hockey and basketball arenas around then. And then they played Berkeley Community Theater until, I guess, '86. But by then, after that, it was, the bigger places, about as small as you get to see them in North America, was the Kaiser, which I think is about 9,000. Cal Expo is about 11 or 12. So there were still a few of those, but not too many. And then they went to Europe in '90, really at the height of their popularity. Some Bruce Hornsby was in the band, and they played some extremely small places there. The place in Berlin held under 4,000, and the place in Paris that I saw them at, I think was about 5,000, maybe 5,500.
Wow!
And it was a blimp. It was a kind of an inflated building, and it had a very small general admission pit in the front, very small, 50 feet maybe, and then some seats up to the back, which, we're talking, maybe 30 or 40 rows. It wasn't huge. Again, it was 5,000. So for sure that was, and to me, I distinctly remember there were 2 shows in Paris, and I'd been seeing the Dead by then for 3 years, and mostly, or exclusively, stadiums, arenas, and the big North American style 15 to 20,000 seat outdoor summer amphitheaters. And I distinctly remember looking around and during the music and saying, I can't believe I'm seeing the Dead in a place this small. And it was as much about the setting. The shows were great too, so that was cool. And then actually the next couple of shows after that, the next 3 were in London at Wembley Arena, and that's only about 10,000 seats. So even that was a lot smaller than we'd be used to seeing in North America. So that was pretty cool. Good tour.
I'm trying to. There's a lot of questions in my head. I'm very fascinated by a lot of my generation. If they saw the Dead, they were raised on, the Brendan Byrne 5-night runs or the Spectrum, multiple runs at big rock halls. But to me, I'm just curious, like when you listen to shows, how much, talk about how much of an impact the venues, even before you started to see them, the smaller venues, how it affected the show itself as far as the sound, and if you can distinctly tell sometimes between a smaller venue and a larger venue, even with a soundboard.
Yeah, generally not. I can't, and but it's probably because I'm not an engineer, so I don't know what nuances of the hall I'd be listening for in a board tape. Occasionally, in an audience tape, you can really get the vibe. You know, I've heard the really good audience tape of the recent Dead release from the Fox in Atlanta, and you just really get that sense that you're listening to a small venue, which you were, about 3,000 seats. Whereas you can also tell when you're listening to a stadium show on an audience tape. So I don't really tell. And it's funny that you mentioned, can you, and all, if you're asking also about the performance level.
Right.
And in that case, not really at all. And I say that because it occurs to me sometimes I get emails and requests from people saying, oh, you got to release something from the Greek, or you got to release something from Red Rocks. And it's such an odd request for me to hear because performance does not always equate to venue, and which isn't to say they played some great shows at the Greek in Berkeley and Red Rocks, but it's never been, not even, if there were 10, 15, 20 things on the criteria level of what we're picking shows for release based on, venue would never even end up on that list of even 100 things. It's just strictly about performance, and then there are things like sound quality, and then there are things like band lineup and things like that. But in terms of venue, and I think that's why you see so many releases that we do from kind of strange places, from Iowa or the Fox in Atlanta we just released, and we just announced a show that's we're releasing in February from Missoula, Montana, and I think that demonstrates that we're really not focusing on the cities and the venues. We're focusing on the good and unique and interesting music, and it just happens that they played a heck of a lot of that in the weird places. So, yeah, it's interesting. They often played really well in the well-known places, but they often played extremely well in the out-of-the-way places.
Absolutely. No, I mean, this is why it's such a high honor to talk to you. I mean, it's interesting because you did say something to the effect you were going to see concerts in 83, 84 pre-coma, but the Dead, they were really under the radar prior to In the Dark. I mean, is that fair to say? Like, were you aware of the Dead in the early 80s, or did it just sort of that In the Dark with the sort of coming out of the diabetic coma for Garcia, it seemed like things just got blown up at that point. But I'm just curious as to how DL were the Dead that they were able to get away with playing UVM. I can't even imagine a band today, trying to play college campuses. I mean, politically it would be a disaster. The whole thing would be a mess. But I'm just curious, in your mind, when did you actually get hip to them, and was it before 87?
Yeah, it definitely was. I was in 84, 85. My brother, as so many of us who got into the Dead, got into it through an older sibling, or somebody we respected who was a couple of years older. In that case, that was my brother, and he came home. I was 1984. I was 13 years old, and it was just the time when I started exploring music. I'd listened to a little bit before that, but really around 83, 84, 85 is when I really started exploring music as a little 13 and 14-year-old, and I was hearing the stuff that was being played on the radio, and, this is stuff, think of the popular stuff in 83 to 85. We're talking Duran Duran and Michael Jackson and a lot of bands like that, and it is not a knock against those, but it just wasn't my taste. It wasn't music that I really at all related to, but then I would hear the older stuff, and the kind of classic rock, Led Zeppelin and Jimi Hendrix and bands like that, and I really, really, really got off on that stuff, and it just, I think, had to do with my personality and the kind of people I was hanging out with, and that was the music we entirely gravitated towards. It was not at all this kind of new early 80s stuff. And then my brother turned me on around 84 to Skeletons from the Closet, the Dead's first greatest hits album that came out in 1974, the one with the Golden Road and songs like that. And instantly, of all these great bands I'd been hearing, Zeppelin and Hendrix and all those, I put this thing on, and instantly I was with a buddy of mine, Steve, and we just lit up. We said, man, this is unlike any music we'd ever heard. And then I remember that was when Rolling Stone magazine, in the pre-internet days, they used to publish a little, quarter page, half a page of every Rolling Stone had a little section called On the Road. And it was bands' tour listings, and I think that's how a lot of people found out about bands' tour listings. And in every single issue, when I started looking at Rolling Stone magazine around 1984 onward, every single issue, which was every 2 weeks, there were Grateful Dead tour dates listed in there, which to me, I just didn't understand it. I knew the bands toured once every 2 years to back an album, but it just seemed these guys were always on the road.
Right.
And they were playing places I'd never heard of, like Cuyahoga Falls, which turns out is a big 15,000-seat amphitheater. But I really had no impression of what kind of venues the Dead would be playing. This band that I was now within months completely into. You know, a lot of friends, older brothers had Working Man's Dead, American Beauty, Live Dead, Europe 72. They turned me on to all that stuff. And then around early 85, started getting into live tapes from, again, a good friend, his older brother. And that is when I got the same tapes that I think we all got. Harper College in 213 and 214, 70. The two final nights at the Fillmore East in April of 71. What else is in that batch? Orpheum 76, the 718 show. This is before the Betty boards had come out, so it wasn't the things like Cornell and stuff like that. So I started getting their live tapes and realizing, man, this band is incredibly special. So by 85, I distinctly remember this on my 15th birthday, November 85, the Dead were playing in Rochester, New York, and a whole lot of friends, older brothers, went to this show because Rochester was very close to where I lived in Canada. So everybody was going down, and I couldn't go. I was 15 years old, and, you know, getting in a car at 15 wasn't something your folks are really into.
Right.
And so then I said, okay, next year, and then they played Buffalo, New York. That was with Dylan and Petty, July 4th, 86. And for some reason, and I think it had to do with summer school, I couldn't go to that show. So I was really bummed. But I said, look, I've been following these guys in their careers for like the last 3 years, and it seems that all they do is play, so I'll get my chance. And then right after that Buffalo show, a week later, 3 days later, Jerry went into a coma. And I thought, damn, there's my, you know, a possibility of seeing the Dead. But then, as we all know, he got better and came back, you know, stronger than he'd been in 10 years. Probably stronger in 10 years. And then, of course, the In the Dark stuff, so that's when I started seeing them. So, you know, I got on board at that time, but I certainly wasn't inspired to see them by the In the Dark stuff. And I got a kick out of it because a lot of the people I went to my first shows with, the first shows I saw were the Hartford show, and then I saw them in Toronto in the summer, June 30th, and the next night in Rochester, New York. And I was with a lot of people who had been going to shows since Beacon Theater 76 and shows like that, and kind of really got an impression of how things had changed, especially the Giant Stadium show, July 12th, 87, and really realized that, you know, this isn't the Dead that I'd been hearing about or reading about, but I still had a great time, and, you know, just kept going for the next 6 years until 1993 I stopped going, so...
No, you said some really interesting things. Could you be specific about when you first heard them, how it was different, what was different, and what made it special when you first heard it, as opposed to, like you said, the early '80s sort of punk rock or rock groups, soul, Michael Jackson? What really stood out on those tapes that really caught your ear?
And it really, by that time in '84, I was really listening to the older stuff like Zeppelin and Hendrix and stuff, and that's what I was saying was that the Dead were so different from me than that stuff, where that stuff I found, as soon as I heard the Dead, I found all of that other music very pedestrian. And,
right.
And that's bands to me like Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and Hendrix, which I think, appreciate when I hear them now. I say, it's pretty cool, I like this music. But I found there was a depth to the Dead's music, and what I also really liked was there was a feeling or a sound of honesty in their music. It didn't feel that they were trying to replicate any particular sound, whereas any other band, you know, Pink Floyd got the rap as, you know, they were a psychedelic band or whatever they were doing, an acid band, let's say. And, you know, the Dead, before you hear the Dead, you hear about them being an acid band, and they're the farthest thing in the world from that. You know, there's songs like Dark Star on Live Dead that certainly will, you know, it's great music to accompany, you know, certain days of your
right, life. No, I'm with you. Yeah.
Grateful Dead music, I found, you know, the first song on there was The Golden Road. And that was just such an uplifting, peppy song that was so catchy. And then there were other songs there like Sugar Mag and One More Saturday Night, Mexicali Blues, which, you know, and then the Love Light, there was the edited version of Love Light from one of the Warner Brothers samplers, the Live Dead Love Light. So I just couldn't believe the variety of music that I was hearing. And I knew that album was everything from 1967 to 71, and I couldn't believe that 4 years of music from one band. You listen to any other band from that era, and they generally sound the same, and they sound like a shell of themselves by the fourth or fifth year, whereas the Dead just kept growing and bringing new influences into their sound, but they never kind of got pegged down as one band. They were never just the same. Like, and as I collected the Dead's records, and that was a pretty quick process for me. It was within probably 6 to 12 months I'd collected virtually all of their vinyl. There was a couple things that were out of print that I just couldn't get. Blues for Allah and Wake of the Flood. Those took me a little bit of time to get. I got a Mars Hotel pretty quickly. But otherwise, I think I had pretty much everything. And I was shocked. And I really appreciated all of the different sounds of the Dead. I'd listen to Anthem of the Sun and be blown away. And, of course, American Beauty, Working Man's Dead, and then the Skull and Roses in Europe 72. And then I put on Shakedown Street and Tear Open Station, which is completely different. It's still clearly Grateful Dead music, but it's completely different, and it's still, to me, an incredibly deep album with a lot to enjoy on it. So I never found that the Dead hit that stage. You listen to a band like The Band, and their first couple of years could do no wrong, and then the stuff that they were doing towards the end of their career, recording career, right before the last waltz, all the kind of mid-70s stuff, it's okay, but it's certainly not, it doesn't even touch the other stuff. It's almost like they were just going through the motions, and that's what I find with so many bands, that I really do like a lot of these bands, but they just never went anywhere for me, whereas the Dead just kept growing, and then you hear, Dead Set and Reckoning, 2 albums recorded at exactly the same time, and they couldn't be more different. So, I really got off on it, just how much I could enjoy it. It really plays into the question a friend when I was in college asked me. He said, well, man, how many versions of Sugar Magnolia can you possibly listen to? And I said, all of them, because truly they are all different, especially when you listen to one from 1972 and then you listen to one from 1985. They're ridiculously different, yet they're still entirely Grateful Dead music. And that's what I got off on. That's what I still get off on. Here, 30 years I've been listening to this band, and I still never tire of it. And I think that's also because I do listen to a pretty wide variety of music, so that when I do listen to the Dead, it's not something at all like I've just been listening to. A lot of people, try and get me to listen to music. Oh, you got to hear this band, you'll love them. They sound so much like the Dead. I said, well, why would I?
Yeah, right, exactly. Why do I want to hear that?
I'll listen to the Dead. If I'm going to listen to other music, I want to listen to something that's completely unlike the Dead approach it, because I do like a lot of different music. But so I think that again, another long answer. But what I did appreciate was how dynamic they were, and how different they were, and how diverse they were, and how they never sounded like they were trying to be anything. They just were playing music that inspired them at that moment.
Long answers are fine. This is very important. I think you bring up the band, for instance. Like you talk about music from Big Pink, the second album, and like by the mid '70s, late '70s, Islands. Those albums were flat, and I maintain that it's because the ego got out of control, especially with Robbie Robertson. So you saw the dissolution of the band. The Dead, there seemed to be. When I really have studied all the guys, they all brought different sort of skills to the table. And Jerry, being the sort of de facto leader, it seemed that they were able to always channel their egos so well. And there was a lot of love, which is why they lasted so long, and is why the music kept growing. I mean, is there validity to that? Because I really feel like if one of those guys was really an egomaniac, that band would have dissolved a long time ago. But they all were.
I think I agree with that completely, and I say that, and I know a few of them in the band very well now, having worked with them for so long. And while I wouldn't necessarily say they're all entirely egoless, I think anybody who's really good at something and gets accolades for doing what they do and doing it well. But I don't think that they were very good rock stars, and I say that in deference to them because they didn't let it go to their heads. Even Bobby got the rap as being the big rock star in the band, right? And even he wasn't a huge rock star in the sense of being a rock star. And Bobby is one of the most humble people I've ever met, and I've got to know him very well, and you've talked to him before, and he truly is a humble, down-to-earth, compassionate, kind person. And if there's any rock star behavior, I've never seen it or even heard about it.
No, it's true.
And he did have his little outlet in the early 80s with Bobby and the Midnights, and he got to be a rock star and got to really step away from the Grateful Dead and play in an incredibly tight band. But even then, he wasn't the rock star that, a rock star might think that he was, somebody from the Eagles, let's say. You never hear the stories of, any of these guys being, that guy's just like Don Henley or that guy. They don't have that rap. And they've worked with a lot of people. You think of somebody like Mickey, who's worked with thousands of people, really, at least hundreds, in terms of engineers and musicians and stuff. And, as much as Mickey might be, and is, thankfully, a perfectionist when it comes to music, he's not a demanding control freak kind of guy that you hear about other musicians. So, it's, again, I don't know if I'd say they were egoless, but they certainly were able to check their egos in regards to playing with the Grateful Dead. It was like a self-policing system. Well, I just don't think that stuff would have been tolerated. These guys, I think they would have instantly ripped on them if they let it get out of hand, and that's why these guys were very honest with each other. So, they're good guys. That's all you can say is that they're just really good guys.
That's what I say, man, because, you look at, you go back, I've interviewed Zakir and Airto, and they all speak about going to Mickey's barn. Jerry was there. They'd play for 4 straight days. I mean, to me, it was about the art. Like you said, they weren't good rock stars. They cared about the music, and I think that that's an important thing because I've been humbled on this journey because I've interviewed, like you said, Bobby. I had a great interview with him, and he. What's humbling to me is to know that a lot of the fans were. I don't know if they really ever appreciated how great of musicians these guys were. I mean, they were there for a lot of people were there for the party, especially as we turn into the late '80s and early '90s. And that to me is a little bit humbling because, I mean, when you put Kreutzmann's Bayou drumming style with Phil's classical background, with Jerry's country bluegrass, I mean, that's, when you listen to the band, I mean, it's the best honky-tonk bar band you got, and they're such great musicians and so spontaneous and, like you said, non-controlling. I just think that those are major assets to any musician, especially younger musicians, because we don't want to hear bands that sound like the Grateful Dead. We want people that actually have individuality. So I just wanted you to spend a little bit of time talking about how much you love the sound and whether you ran into people at these shows that really were there deeply on the musical level or were just spun out of their minds.
I certainly did see those people. I was seeing the band a lot in places that held 18 or 20,000 people or even 50 or 60,000 people. So, of course, there were a lot of those people, but I certainly didn't really gravitate towards the people who were there for anything but the music. I was a taper. So, for me, the main thing was listening and being diligent about recording and getting that recording so that it was saved. And granted, there were 100 other people taping and saving it, and now we all know that there's board tapes of all this material too. But nonetheless, my focus was on the music, and I think all of the people I hung out with, our focus was all on music, to the point that here we are now, 25 years later since we started going to shows, my friends, and we're still listening to the music, which I think demonstrates we're certainly not partying and getting ripped out of our minds or anything. We're, when we talk about the Dead, we talk solely about the music and how much fun it was being at shows, but because of the music is why it was fun. It was unlike any other band where, these guys were honest musicians. As we were saying, they're certainly not rock stars. They are musicians. That's, there's a big difference between those two things. There are plenty of rock stars who are terrible musicians, but these guys certainly fall into the musician category. Like you say, they're all completely outstanding musicians, and the sum of these guys put together creates the magic of the Grateful Dead sound.
Absolutely, that's about as best articulated as I've ever heard. I'm not going to sit here and say that I wouldn't go and be in the front row of Santa Fe Downs 9/10/83, and just having a ball and and partying a little bit. But the idea is that it's just the humanity aspect too. To me, they were the most real. It was such a real, authentic experience, whether you were on acid or not. And to me, it's. I want to shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about, if you can answer this with some perspective, how long did it take you to fully understand your role as when you got the job as an archivist. I mean, I can't. Was it just simultaneous, or did it? When did it kind of click? And boy, these are the things I wasn't even aware of going into this thing.
Well, it was a huge learning curve. I got there in 1999, so we're going into 15 years. In February, it'll be 15 years since I started working with these guys. And I came in as a big deadhead, a guy who really loved the music, but had certainly not been a scholar of the music, the way somebody like Dick was, and lots of people like that. Again, I completely appreciated it. And a couple things happened immediately upon walking through the door. I mean, literally clicked the second I walked in. One was to check my fandom at the door and look at this strictly on a professional level. Preserving the music, making sure it's well organized, well cataloged. But once I started having a bit of influence on what was released, realizing how important it was to check my personal biases at the door and personal preferences at the door, and really just make this about what is the best music to represent the Grateful Dead legacy. And that's really been the driving force for 15 years, is when we put music out, just really seeing, okay, how does this fit into the greater look of how the Dead's legacy is going to be looked at in 20 or 30 years, or even right now when something is released, and how does this fit into what we've released in the last couple of years, that kind of thing. So there were some immediate changes, and it was a pretty steep learning curve on how to really listen to this music objectively, because anybody can hear something and really get off on something, and then you might listen to it a few times and go, really it's not that great, but it sure is a fun thing to listen to. So it's really trying to find those objective ways to listen to music and really realize what's good and what's not so good versus what I like and what I don't like. So it was a pretty big learning curve, and I think it did take a couple of years to really hit my stride at least, where I felt very comfortable and completely confident in what we were doing. And in some cases, that came immediate. There was one album we did called Ladies and Gentlemen, The Grateful Dead, that to this day is one of the finest things I've ever worked on, and that was essentially the first big thing I worked on. So,
talk a little bit.
It's still a learning process for sure. We still get new tapes, and the one I think misconception sometimes when people ask me about picking stuff for release is that they seem to think it might just be me doing the picking when I really couldn't do it on my own. I rely on a lot of very good ears for opinions, and these are people who I've known for many, many years whose opinion on the music I really respect, people who are able, maybe even to a greater extent than I am, to look at this music objectively and listen to it objectively. And I do listen to a lot of different voices to really come up with that consensus of the great show for the next release. So we put a lot of work into it. A lot of people ask, well, what do you have planned for 2014? And aside from this Missoula thing, and the Missoula show I keep talking about from Montana, just got released. Go to dead.net and look at the 2014 subscriptions for the Dave's Picks. And people ask, well, what's coming out after that? And I really have no idea. And only because we spend so much time working on each individual release, I don't really have this master list of, here's the next 10 releases. We really, really make sure it's the perfect thing. And that's how we can look back in 5 years and look at any given release and say, yeah, I'm proud of that. That's a good one. And, make sure that if the band decides to listen to it or their family does, make sure that they're going to be proud of it too. So, that's kind of how we look at it. Make sure that it's going to really represent the legacy well.
Let's break it down though. When you say listen objectively, I'm not asking about the other heads the other ears that you put it to. Just yourself. If it was Lemieux bias, what would that be, and what does it mean to listen to a show objectively? What are you listening to specifically? Take the Missoula show. Like how do you listen to a show objectively? And once you segue off of that, what would be the Lemieux bias show?
Well, okay. Listening to that Missoula show objectively.
We get the date on that, by the way. What's the date on that?
May 14th, 1974.
Okay.
So it's the third Wall of Sound show. They opened up the Wall of Sound in March at the Cow Palace, San Francisco, and then they took 6 weeks off, and then they started the tour on May 12th in Reno, and then May 14th in Missoula, and that's the show we're releasing. A nice little college basketball arena, about 8,000 seats, big crowd. I think there's about 7,000 or 8,000 people. And listening to that's a show, a good example is that's a show that I've been listening to for literally 20 years or more. And I've always really, really liked it. And it's come close to being released a few times, and then for whatever reason, something like Louisville a month later gets released, or something like Philadelphia 3 months later gets released. So things happen, and then things get in the way that, we end up not releasing a show where a show like Missoula has always been, I don't want to call it on the back burner, but it's always been one of these shows that, okay, when we get to 74, here are what I consider the top 4 or 5 for release. So it's a show that kind of keeps crawling back into my consciousness, and then every time I hear it, I go, yeah, this is a great show. Why hasn't this been released yet? And then listening to the overall vibe, make sure that, the band isn't making too many mistakes. And believe me, I used to be really critical of mistakes when the band would make like a really, really big mistake during a song, really mess it up. And now I'm completely forgiving of that, because that's just part of who the Grateful Dead are. And, I hear people say, well, that's what we love about them. Well, I don't love the mistakes, but I accept them. And that's the thing, is it's accepting those mistakes that the band makes. And Missoula has a couple bandies, one in particular at the end of playing in the band. It's nothing. It's, 15 seconds of them missing the return to playing in the band reprise. But the rest of that playing in the band is so incredibly inventive. They really go into some of the jazziest music I've ever heard the Dead do. And really 74 gets a very fair rap of being a very jazzy year for the Dead. And this playing in the band is one of them. So what I'm looking for, I'm listening to the overall vibe of the show. How well do they play it? Then I'm looking at the big moments. And can I pinpoint 4 or 5 major moments that are really key moments in Grateful Dead history? And I can in the first set, there's a Scarlet Begonias. It's the second ever version of Scarlet Begonias. They debuted it at the Cow Palace 6 weeks earlier. Play this way. It's a magnificent version. That's the cool thing. I don't really care if it's the first or second or whatever version, but the fact that it's the second and it's so good, and then it sags into It Must Have Been the Roses, which is only about the 3rd or 4th time they played that, and it's an amazing version of Must Have Been the Roses. That's one of the first set highlights. Then I look at a lot of the smaller first set tunes like Deal and Big River, and they're just played with a huge high level of energy, and then they end up that first set with the big playing in the band about 23 minutes long. So I kind of look at that, and then looking at the second set, you're always looking for, especially something from 1974 or 73 or 72, you want there to be a major second set jam, and there's a real dandy here. They play a Weather Report suite that goes into, again, getting back to jazz, one of the smoothest, jazziest versions of Dark Star that I've ever heard, almost a half hour long, gets into some crazy feedback space, and I've said this before about some shows, but they're, we all have friends who don't like the Grateful Dead because they don't like kind of some of the deeper space that they play. This is that deep space that I think some of those people don't like, because for a few minutes or a few seconds even, there's some feedback blasts that are going to shake your house in a good way. And I say this, man, it's something you got to hear. And then that falls, typical Grateful Dead, falls beautifully into China Doll. And I think that's just what I love about the Grateful Dead. You can have a very structured song like Weather Report Suite, all 3 parts, beautifully sung, beautifully jammed, and then you go into the improvisational bliss of this wonderful, really deep space jazzy Dark Star, and then fall into a beautiful Garcia Hunter ballad in China Doll. And then, so you've got that as a second set, and then later in the second set, you have one of the most rocking, funkiest versions of Not Fade Away you're ever going to hear, that goes into a great rockin' version of Going Down the Road Feeling Bad. So you've got the main big highlights that I look for in a show, which are to say some really big moments, and then some of the smaller songs that are also really good. There's a Roe Jimmy here. There's a U.S. Blues that's outstanding. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. And then the overall energy, we've Deadheads have talked about the X factor in Grateful Dead music forever, and that's kind of what you're listening for, and it's indescribable. You can just sense it, and you don't even have to be a huge Deadhead to hear it. You can just find yourself tapping this. I've heard the phrase from musicians, man, we really had swing that night, or man, that band really has swing.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they're a swing band, but it just means that they're in the groove, they're in the pocket, and they're playing, and I want to say effortlessly, because it must be a lot of work to be up there, but it doesn't sound like they're playing with a lot of effort. It's like a sports team that really, you have a sports team with the biggest talented players in the world, and they just never gel. And then you can have a sports team that really doesn't have the talent, but they sure are good because they have chemistry, and that's what the Dead have, that X factor. And that's kind of what you're listening for. This recent Atlanta 1980 thing we put out, again, this is a night when you can clearly tell the band's chemistry was all locked in together, and they played as one. The music plays the band. it's kind of what you're listening for. That's what I'm listening for.
Well, it's beautiful. I mean, it makes me giddy. So much of this is fantasy related for me, obviously, but at the same time, the band went through different chapters. I mean, you look at the music scene from '73 or '74. You look at the Dead, what they were doing at that time. Jerry was really trying to increase his jazz vocabulary with Merle, doing a lot of sideshows in that sense. Kingfish was coming into play. Mickey and Billy were really experimenting with world rhythm. They had the Digger Rhythm Band in '75. So I mean, it was just a phenomenal. That period in music history is phenomenal. Really, before the advent of pop rock and disco and FM radio and But I can't. I really wanted to talk to you a little bit about my favorite period of the Dead, the underbelly of the beast, essentially like '81 to '84. And I know that a lot of people, thumb their noses at it, but the band was there for 40 years. And they went through many different chapters. And you talked about the Fox Theater, which was 80. But humor me a little bit and talk about, not what you don't like about 81 to 84, but what are the things that you do like when you listen to shows like that?
I like Jerry's ability to play, and I'm really talking 83, 84 now, which is a couple of years that really get a bad rap. And I think in a lot of cases, it's deserved. There were some pretty mediocre bad shows, and they might have been drug-relatedly so in 83, 84. But there are also shows where Jerry is playing, I think, some of the most inventive stuff he had in 10 years, and he's playing incredibly fast. And I don't mean, fast means good, but I mean he's thinking on his toes very quickly, or thinking on his fingers, I guess. But and I'm talking about songs like Scarlet Begonias. I'm talking about songs where Lazy Lightning Supplication, songs where they're structured songs and you really have to play them well in order to make them work. I'm not talking about a song like Ramblin' on Rose, which is a great song. It's really one of my favorite first set Garcia Harjans, but it's not a song that has a structure that's incredibly complicated that's going to leave you a lot of room to have to be nimble on. And I find that in that 83, 84, we hear the phrase pre-coma, which is a phrase I hadn't really heard, or at least I hadn't thought about it too much until I'd spent some time with Nick Baumgarten from The New Yorker when he did a big piece on the Dead about a year ago. And he talked a lot about the defining split between the pre-coma, pre-86, and post, in Jerry's playing in particular. And I really started paying attention to that, and it is certainly there. There certainly is a big difference. And Jerry came back in '87, in late '86. He was clean for a while, for the most part, and you can really sense that in his singing and in his focus of being there. Whereas in a lot of that '83, I know you're not looking for what I don't like about it, but what I don't like about it is that it feels that for a lot of the music, there's a lack of focus, and I mean that in terms of concentration. Anything that any of us do, me talking to you right now, you got to focus on what you're doing. You got to focus on what you're talking about. And I get the sense in listening to a lot of those shows that one or more of the band members just simply weren't focused on the task at hand. And I don't mean missung lyrics or mumbled lyrics and things like that, but it just it might almost be a case of calling it in, where the actual playing in a lot of cases is very, very good, but it lacks that passion that is, I think, a sign of the focus and the concentration being there. So, I'm very, very diligent about trying to find a show from that 83, 84 period to put out. Now, some of the reason, for no releases in a while or ever from those couple of years, there are a lot of tape recording problems, but that's really nothing we can do about. But there certainly are a couple of shows that I've got my ear on and have for a long time, and just have never felt, obviously, or they would have come out by now, 100% confident that this is a show that should come out on CD in its entirety. But, we've come close a few times, and I'm sure we will get there. And, if people follow my work on Sirius XM, I do a daily show on the Sirius XM Dead channel, and I do a thing on the Dead's website called the Taper section, and I do put a lot of that music up there, a lot of 83, 84, things like 82, 81, which I also love. We actually put up a great shakedown stream from 81 today on 30 Days of the Dead, which I highly recommend. I don't know when this is airing, Jake, but if it's airing in November, we've got a promotion on DeadNet where every day for the month of November, we do this every year, we give away a song. And the first one today on November 1st is Shakedown Street from 1981, and it's just a really great version that also happens to have a great mix. So anyhow, I love that stuff, but there are a lot of tape problems with that 83, 84 stuff, recording problems. Absolutely no weird guitar in the mix, very little bass in the mix sometimes, way too much kick drum in the mix, and these are things that have prevented certain shows from being released.
You know, it's so great to hear you talk about that last part there. Why was there sloppy execution of the taping of this? Was Healy Healy was unbelievable. I mean, there's a great picture of him from the Greek in '84 with like the earphones around his neck, and he's just sort of shrugging his shoulders like, I can't think of a better place I'd rather be. But I'm with you. I listen to these shows, and my favorite things about these, I agree with you, there's a lot of inconsistency, but the shows that Garcia is really amped up and he's energetic, even if it's for 15 minutes at a time, you hear the whole band get excited because they just want, to me, it's the best. You don't look at you can look at the beauty, and like you reeled off that Missoula show, and it just, to be at that show would have been remarkable. Because of the energy level and because of the diversity of the songs and the fact that all the guys were at the height of their chops were amazing, and then you get into that sort of underbelly, and it's sloppy. But when you hear Jerry screaming out lyrics, I'm listening to this Santa Fe show. I cannot stop listening to this Alabama Greatest Story Dire Wolf because Jerry's just he's belting it out and he's having a ball, and I'm like. You could just hear the guys, they just wanted him to be okay. Because he was going through a really difficult time, and he really wasn't very good at articulating it or getting really a lot of help for it, which is why he wound up in the coma. But why? What happened with the sound? Why was the mix all screwed up? Because there are times where I'm trying to listen to the two drummers, and I can't hear them, or I can't hear Phil. Well,
I think a lot of it is, every hall sounds different. And for instance, a small venue, Jerry's guitar, for instance, let's say the Warfield in San Francisco, and Jerry's guitar often came so loudly through his stack, through his amp, it didn't need to come out of the PA very much. So when you have a Garcia band board tape recorded at the Warfield, let's say, and the PA didn't have a lot of Jerry guitar coming out of it because there was so much Jerry guitar coming out of his own stack to fill the room that it was a little low. So, and that's just one example, whereas some venues, the bottom end is so loud through the subs and shaking the building, but, you don't need to mix too much of that into the PA, so you listen to the PA tapes. There's a lot of shows from that 82 to 84 period, 85 even, where, Phil, you talk to people who were there, and Phil shook the building, but you can't hear it on the tape because he was shaking the building. He wasn't necessarily coming through the PA, and so you've got tapes that are completely lacking in bass and bottom end. And likewise, there's one show in '84, and I won't get into the specifics because I hope someday we can find a fix for it. I don't know what that is, but I think it's a great show. But unfortunately, Weir's guitar is a little low, if not absent at times. And low is fine. Low, we deal with low all the time. A lot of the two-track stuff we release is not perfect. This is too high, this is too low, that's fine. But when it's an absence of something, we just can't do that. That I think negates a huge aspect of what the Grateful Dead sound is all about. So,
no, listen, I want to tell you something. There's a show that epitomizes this amazingly well. The Cuyahoga Falls 6/29/84. Lesh on the audience recording, he's shaking the building on the Dear Mr. Fantasy, and then you listen to the soundboard, you can't hear him. It's really quite
exactly.
I mean, it is a stunning, because I listened to that audience tape, and my rear view mirror was shaking. And then I put the soundboard, and it's flat. And so I know exactly what you're saying. I really want to try to get one of those 83, 84s over the line for the rest of the group, because I just, to me, I mean, obviously, the experience shifted quite a bit around the time when, you got in Hartford 87, so fascinating, In the Dark, I don't think had been released yet, and clearly they, you had a couple years there, 87, 88, where, it was. But when do you think it got to become when they got to become international? When they became known, like I said before, going back to that before, where they were so underground. My folks didn't know what the Dead was, even though they were playing at Stony Brook all the time.
I think it was 87. I think that there's no doubt it was that summer 87. I distinctly remember the Dead played June 30th in Toronto. I went to that, and then on July 1st, my friends and I took the train to Rochester, New York for the July 2nd show. And I remember at the train station picking up Rolling Stone. Here I am, 16 years old, on Dead tour, and I pick up Rolling Stone magazine, and here were the Dead on the cover of Rolling Stone, which they'd been on before, but not in quite a while. And from then on, it was the year of the Dead. They were on Letterman again. Bob and Jerry were on Letterman in the fall of '87. They did the 5 nights at Madison Square Garden, returning. So it was a year of Dead activity that I think elevated that, and then I think a lot of people who had been going to see other bands at the time, we're talking the Duran Durans and stuff, got a taste of what a Dead show is like and realized it's a really good party. And that's when you really saw a lot more people, I think, coming to shows for other than the music. And that's disappointing, because then, I'll tell you what was disappointing for me is that it just became a big hassle. Everything became a big hassle where towns didn't want us to play anymore. The band had to issue warnings like, hey, be good to this town or we're not playing. And then when you start seeing places like Hartford in 87 and 88 were great, I went to both those years, mellow New England scene, and then they get banned because they really the Deadheads destroyed the downtown scene in Hartford, and they did go back in '90, but those were surprise gigs announced a week ahead of time. Worcester, Massachusetts, banned, same thing. Great Grateful Dead places, and this started happening all the time. This was, Kaiser. I went to the last Kaiser shows in February of '89, and they were scheduled to do March of '89, but they got canceled because the town didn't want. The neighborhood said, no, we don't want this. This is really disruptive to our lives, and that sucks to hear that that's what we're doing, and you can say all you want, it's the other people who are doing it, but it's we're all Deadheads, and whether you're the type who are trashing people's backyards or you're the, clean type of people, we're all Deadheads, so it all reflects poorly on us. And that's stuck. So,
yeah.
That was a bummer.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was going to ask you, did your brother get a chance to go to 62184 Maplewood in Ontario, I think it was?
He did not. He went to the 87 with me, but he didn't go to that. That was the one with the band, the Save a benefit.
Right, and the only reason I ask is that, and I want to do this in part 2. I want to do a part 2 with you next week, if that's possible, because I'd like to talk to you really specifically about your taping, the tricks of the trade, and some of the early guys that helped you, because that to me is one of the most unique things about the Dead, especially before the tapers section. I mean, this is predating Lemieux taping, but it's just the idea that you could just go in. I mean, the stories are epic. Guys going in wheelchairs, even though they had mic stands taped to their legs, and then they're setting up 10 rows out in Worcester. I mean, the access that the band allowed, the freedom. We talk about being a free country, independence. That was, the Dead was freedom. The Grateful Dead were freedom in my mind. And to me, before we go into part 2, talk a little bit about when you first started taping, the excitement of being able to get into a venue and not be hassled, and to set up the mics, and the best spot that you set up for to show how exciting that was.
Well, to me, I think the main exciting thing for me is I loved driving out of that venue listening to the show. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, having a cassette tape. And, I was also recording Garcia band shows, which did not allow taping, and that is when you had to sneak your equipment in. And I had a Sony D5, which is about the size of a regular hardcover textbook. Like it's, I don't know, probably 10 inches by 7 inches by about 2 or 3 inches thick, and it's heavy. And, you're strapping that stuff down your back, and you got your microphone strapped down your legs, and you got your microphone cables acting as your belt. It's not easy, and it's not fun. But compared to the Dead, I think the Dead really had that attitude that, if you're not harming somebody, what's the harm in letting somebody do something? And, they didn't see it as much of a threat to what they were doing in terms of selling records, because they didn't sell many records, and they realized it wasn't going to help if they didn't if they stopped allowing taping or didn't allow it. So they just let people do it. They know people liked it, and they saw that there was, I think, some benefit in terms of allowing people to trade these tapes and kind of let the word of mouth go around on how good this band was. What better advertisement for the Grateful Dead and a Grateful Dead concert was there than listening to a good Dead tape? What got me psyched and raring to go was listening to shows like Harper College. And granted, I never saw a show like Harper College, but I did see shows that were good. I saw great shows that the energy came through. I suggest people to kind of get a vibe on, granted I was going in 87 onward, but, my first show, if you listen to the Bird Song from March 26, 87,
Sure.
And the China Rider, two real highlights from the show, and you can't help but notice that the energy level was through the roof. And I distinctly remember, to this day, I can visualize and sonically visualize, whatever that was, perfectly how high the energy level was in that room, 17,000 people, 16,000 people, when they were playing that China Rider, and more specifically that Bird Song. Without a doubt, the most high-energy Bird Song I ever saw, and one of the most high-energy, intense Bird songs I think they ever played, period. I think that is kind of what really got me going.
I just have to ask you, as a taper, I think that if I was in that area and they were peaking like live, you were watching a Bird Song. Is David Lemieux looking at when they're peaking? Is David Lemieux looking to make sure that the levels are correct, or is David Lemieux
100%? Absolutely 100%. Now, granted, I didn't tape till my 50th show or so. I wasn't taping until '89, I guess. But absolutely, it was exactly that. That as the band got louder, because the intensity and the energy level, my inclination was to say, this is awesome, and then at the same time look down at my levels. 100%, it was at the forefront of my consciousness, is the louder they got, the more I had to pay attention to the levels. And just as, at that 45-minute mark of the second set, when they were still playing, hadn't gone into drums, as much as I was enjoying that He's Gone at the 45-minute mark, I was getting worried that my 46-minute tape, 90 minutes total, 46 minutes aside,
Right.
was going to get cut. And absolutely, that's why I stopped taping. I stopped enjoying the spontaneity of being at a Dead show, of the listening to that creation of the live music on stage. I was paying way too much attention, I think as all tapers do, to what was going on your tape. And as much fun as it was to drive over that tape and listen to it in the hotel room, it really detracted, and I became very conscious of that. And said, well, I really do like getting off at the show. I like dancing, and I like listening to them, and I like not having to worry about this. So around 92, I stopped taping, but I did tape bit 93, but they also stopped playing so well in my mind. So I think I missed out on really partying at some of the better shows I saw, because I was so intent on taping, and I did a decent job taping, so I guess it was worth it. But nonetheless, I probably would have enjoyed a show like 32490 in Albany more had I not been taping, and there's a few shows like that. But nonetheless, I had a good time, glad I did what I did.
Well, this was a nice, neatly wrapped 55-minute first set. I look forward next week to going into a lot more depth about the taping and really some of your mentors and maybe some of the people that weren't the biggest David Lemieux fans either. I just think it's important to paint the entire picture. And to your credit, I read that New Yorker article, and just keep on keeping on, man. You really do get it, and Whoever brought you into the mix knew exactly what they were doing. I just look forward to picking up part 2 and doing a little China Cat bird song next week.
Right on. Thanks a lot, Jake, and I'll talk to you very soon.
Talk to you soon, David.